Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today, we've got some crucial news you don't want to miss. Let's dive right into the top financial headlines and break down what's happening. This week, one of the key economic events capturing the attention of global markets is the release of the September inflation data from the US Department of Labor. Earlier today, that report finally came out, giving us an update on the Consumer Price Index, CPI, for September. For this analysis, we're looking at a report from the Wall Street Journal. One of the co-authors is Ching-te, often referred to as the Fed Whisperer. His insights tend to carry weight because he has a unique understanding of the Federal Reserve's thinking. Since market reactions hinge on how the Fed interprets these numbers, his take adds valuable perspective. The headline of the Wall Street Journal article is "Inflation Continues Its Bumpy Decline with Mixed September Reading." The subheadline notes that this is the data marks one of the last major inflation reports voters will see before Election Day. The report shows inflation hitting a three-year low, though it's cooling down more slowly than expected. The Labor Department reported Thursday that September's CPI rose 2.4% from the same time last year, compared to a 2.5% increase in August. This 2.4% figure is slightly higher than economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal had predicted, which was 2.3%. When you exclude the more volatile categories like food and energy, the core CPI rose by 3.3% year-over-year, which is a bit above August's 3.2% rise and higher than economists' expectations. This inflation report is the last CPI update we'll get before the upcoming election, highlighting a challenge for Democrats. Their goal is to highlight economic progress while deflecting frustration over rising prices. On the one hand, inflation is back down to where it was when President Biden took office. But the average American isn't feeling that relief, as prices for everyday essentials like groceries, dining, housing, and insurance remain significantly higher than 4 years ago. Here's a key point: inflation data only measures the rate at which prices increase from their already high levels. Even if inflation was zero today, the cost of living would still be much higher than it was pre-pandemic. So, while the numbers look promising, the average American's experience tells a different story. They're still feeling the squeeze. The Wall Street Journal also cites Ryan Sweet, chief U.S. economist at Oxford Economics, who said, "The report is disappointing, but as inflation moves toward the Fed's target, the road will be bumpy." He noted that the inflation outlook hasn't changed much. The labor market doesn't seem to pose a significant inflationary risk, which explains why the report's headline called the data mixed. Investors, of course, are always trying to guess how the Fed will react to these numbers. According to Timmy Rouse, investors are re-evaluating the timeline for interest rate cuts, partly due to recent labor market data suggesting the economy might be stronger than expected. While many still anticipate rate cuts before the end of the year, they now expect the pace of cuts in 2024 to be slower than previously thought. This implies that the Fed is unlikely to cut rates by 50 basis points in November, and instead, two smaller 25 basis point cuts are becoming the consensus. In short, while this inflation data offers a glimpse of progress, it's clear that the road to lower inflation, and by extension, lower interest rates will be gradual, as investors and policymakers adjust to evolving economic realities. The second major piece of news I want to share with everyone today is the latest update on the tense situation in the Middle East. I'll break it down into three key reports. First, Bloomberg published a major story today with the headline, "Israel Vows Deadlier Iran Strike as Biden Seeks Restraint." The subtitle reads, "White House Trying to Temper Israel's Retaliation Against Iran." Israel Defense Minister says its response will be surprising. This story highlights the growing tension between the US and Israel. President Biden, in his first conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu since August, urged Israel not to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, something Tehran sees as highly provocative. US officials are also concerned that an attack on Iran's infrastructure could spike energy prices and hurt the global economy. Israel's Security Cabinet was set to meet Thursday night to decide how to respond to Iran's missile strikes last week. Israeli media reports that any action will likely be decided by Netanyahu and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, with the possibility of an immediate response. Here's the catch though, while Biden has reaffirmed his commitment to Israel's security, he's drawing a line: Israel should focus on military targets, not nuclear or oil facilities. That's a critical point because it shows how the US is trying to manage this situation carefully, especially with the global economy at risk. The second important update also comes from Bloomberg. According to a report from Russia's state news agency, President Putin plans to meet with Iran's president to discuss the Middle East situation. They'll meet in the capital of Turkmenistan for what's described as a serious conversation. Interestingly, after this meeting, Putin has no plans to contact Netanyahu, which sends a message. Russia's stance here could play a significant role. How far will they go to support Iran? This is definitely something to keep an eye on, as Putin's position could act as a deterrent to Israel, whether Israel acknowledges it or not. Finally, breaking news dropped: a bombshell report. Netanyahu has called this moment a historic opportunity to strike Iran. So, what's behind this bold statement? I think there are two major factors at play here. First, Israel has dealt some heavy blows to Iran's regional allies like Hezbollah and Iranian forces in Syria, weakening their capacity. This could give Israel an advantage, as it wouldn't have to fight on multiple fronts at the same time. Second, the US is tied up with its upcoming elections, and frankly, neither party wants to upset Jewish voters right now. Once the election is over, regardless of who wins, the US will likely shift its focus back to managing Middle Eastern affairs. But at this moment, Washington can't afford to get too involved. This makes Netanyahu feel like now is the perfect moment to act. But let's be real, is Iran truly as vulnerable as Netanyahu thinks? It's unlikely to be that simple. There's a good chance that the situation could escalate further before it gets better, with a very real possibility of Israeli military retaliation against Iran in the near future. The geopolitical tensions in the Middle East are clearly heating up, and it's likely we'll see more development soon. The third major piece of news I want to share with you today relates to the US elections, and it's quite a significant report. This comes from The Economist, which published an analysis titled, "The Race for the House is Close to a Coin Flip." According to their model, Democrats have a roughly 60% chance of winning, while Republicans stand at about 40%. Now, for American voters, both the presidential election and the congressional races matter a great deal. The outcome of the congressional races, particularly who controls the House of Representatives, will shape the next few years of US policy. Currently, the Republicans control the House, but The Economist suggests that the Democrats could take over after this election. So, why does The Economist, one of the world's top economic publications, believe this? Let's dive into their methodology. The subtitle of their article explains the process. Their US congressional election model estimates the chances for both parties to win control of the House and Senate. They combine national and state-level polling, past election results, and candidate data to calculate the likelihood of various outcomes. The Economist created 10,001 hypothetical scenarios for the House election, where the results range from Democrats significantly outperforming expectations to Republicans having a better-than-expected showing. They even factored in additional uncertainties, such as how Senate results could differ from House results. For example, they mentioned that in a historically Democratic-leaning state, a strong Republican Senate candidate might have a 30% chance of winning in a red wave, but if the overall House votes are balanced, that same candidate's chances drop to just 5%. What's interesting about their model is how it uses these simulations to estimate the probability of each candidate winning, which gives us insight into how each party might fare. For the House, they estimate the likelihood that one party will win a majority of seats based on these simulations. The Economist plans to release their Senate forecast soon, and we'll dive into that analysis when it's available. However, it's essential to remember that every media outlet and research group comes with its own biases and perspectives. Even with advanced models, it's hard to capture the full complexity of an election, especially when political leanings can subtly influence predictions. Nevertheless, we're getting closer to the final days of the US election, and the results are drawing more attention than ever. What's crucial to note is that while these models give us some clarity on the likely outcome, the reality is much more complex. Elections are inherently unpredictable, and anything can happen in the final stretch. The fourth significant piece of news I want to share today comes from Bloomberg, and it's making waves worldwide. The headline reads, Ratan Tata, conglomerate patriarch, dies at 86 with no successor. The subtitle adds that he, an imagined Bigtras chairman of Tata Sons, led JLR buyout. Tata had no children and no heir apparent to lead Tata Trusts. This is a huge story. The richest man in India has passed away, leaving behind not just a business empire but also no direct heirs to continue his legacy. According to Bloomberg, Ratan Tata inherited one of India's oldest conglomerates and, through a series of bold moves, transformed it into a global business powerhouse. He passed away at the age of 86, and the current chairman of Tata Group, Natarajan Chandrasekaran, confirmed his death in a statement today. Ratan Tata never married and had no children. He led Tata Group as chairman for over 20 years, from 1991 onward. His tenure was marked by rapid expansion, and today, the group operates in more than 100 countries, with an annual revenue of $165 billion. His death leaves a significant vacuum in the Tata Trusts, the charitable arm of the company that Tata had been leading since stepping down as chairman of the conglomerate in 2012. Traditionally, the leadership of this trust has always remained within the Tata family. Tata Group, a 156-year-old company, operates through over a dozen publicly traded companies, producing everything from cars and coffee to salt and software, and even runs an airline. It's also deeply involved in high-tech projects, partnering with Taiwan's PSMC to invest $11 billion in a semiconductor plant in India and planning to build an iPhone assembly facility. Under Ratan Tata's leadership, the group turned its focus outward, reversing India's colonial history by acquiring iconic British assets, most notably in 2007, when it bought luxury car brands Jaguar and Land Rover. This move was part of Tata's strategy to globalize the company, transforming it into a symbol of Indian industry's power on the world stage. This news has been widely covered by major financial media outlets, and for good reason. Ratan Tata and the company he led have had a profound impact not only on India but also on the global business landscape. The fact that such a vast empire is left without a designated successor makes the story all the more dramatic. In a way, Tata's story reflects the old saying, "You can't take your wealth with you." It's a stark reminder that, for all the immense wealth and success one might accumulate, we leave it all behind when we go. Ratan Tata's legacy may make many reflect on this truth more deeply. The last important news I want to share today is about Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te making headlines again in international media. Today marks Taiwan's National Day, celebrating the 113th anniversary of the Republic of China, ROC. As expected, Lai delivered a speech, and before the event, there was already widespread consensus in Taiwanese media that he would further explain his stance on cross-strait relations. Since taking office, Lai has already made his views on cross-strait issues clear on two major occasions. The first was during his inaugural address on May 20th. In that speech, Lai emphasized that, according to Taiwan's constitution, the sovereignty of the ROC belongs to all its citizens. He also made a point that the ROC and the People's Republic of China, PRC, are separate entities each with its own citizenship, and no one can hold both nationalities at the same time. In other words, the ROC and PRC are two different countries, and that's just a fact, starting from citizenship. Then, on October 5th, at Taiwan's National Day celebration, Lai made headlines again with what's now known as the ancestor argument. He stated that the PRC could not possibly be considered the homeland for Taiwanese people. Instead, the ROC could be seen as the homeland of those over 75 years old in China, because the ROC existed before the PRC was established. A lot of Taiwanese media focused on how Lai was subtly criticizing some Taiwanese celebrities who publicly celebrate PRC's National Day. But in reality, Lai's statement struck a much deeper chord. It challenged the very foundation of Beijing's policy towards Taiwan. The PRC's approach to Taiwan is built on the idea of reunification with the motherland, but Lai essentially flipped that logic on its head. He argued that if you're talking about a homeland, historically, the ROC existed first. So, if anyone is going to reunify, it wouldn't be Taiwan joining the PRC, it would be the other way around. This speech really put a crack in the narrative the Chinese government has been pushing for decades. They claim the PRC is the rightful ruler of all Chinese territory, including Taiwan, and that Taiwan should return to its motherland. But Lai's argument exposes the flaw in that reasoning, making it much harder for Beijing to continue pushing that line without facing some tough questions. Now, fast forward to today, October 10th, Taiwan's National Day, and Lai once again took the stage to address cross-strait relations. In his speech, he reiterated that the ROC has firmly taken root in Taiwan, Penghu, Kinmen, and Matsu, and that the PRC has no right to represent Taiwan. He also emphasized that democracy and freedom are thriving on this island, making a clear distinction between the two sides of the strait. I've got two main takeaways from Lai's 3 speeches on cross-strait relations that I'd like to share with you. First, Beijing has been labeling all of Lai's statements as pro-independence or pushing a new two-state theory. But honestly, I think this is just China deceiving itself. Lai isn't really going beyond what previous Taiwanese leaders have said. He's just stating what is already a reality. For example, back when Taiwan first started having democratic elections, President Lee Teng-hui described Taiwan and China as having a special state-to-state relationship. He basically said the two sides are separate countries, though they have some unique historical ties. Then President Chen Shui-bian, a lawyer by training, took it even further with his one country on each side statement, making it clear that the Taiwan Strait divides two distinct nations. So, when you look at what Lai is saying now, it's really not a huge departure from the past. Even during Ma Ying-jeou's presidency, while he maintained a more conservative stance, he also never argued that Taiwan and China were the same country. His policy was focused on not seeking reunification, not declaring independence, and avoiding conflict. From China's perspective, even that was seen as a form of delaying reunification, which they also considered pro-independence in its own way. The second thing I'd like to highlight is that Lai Ching-te's emphasis on the ROC actually puts both Beijing and Taiwan's Kuomintang, KMT, in a tough spot. The KMT has traditionally been the party that champions the ROC, and they often accuse the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, of being reluctant to embrace the ROC identity. But now, Lai is making a bold move by fully embracing the ROC banner and using it to position Taiwan as distinct from the PRC. He's basically outmaneuvering the KMT on this issue, leaving them struggling to differentiate themselves. To give you an idea, in today's speech, Lai mentioned the Republic of China a total of 10 times. Compare that to President Tsai Ing-wen, who typically mentioned it around 6 times in her National Day speeches, or even Ma Ying-jeou, who only hit 10 mentions in his most ROC-focused address. This shift really makes it hard for the KMT to claim ownership of the ROC identity, especially since Lai is now wielding it so effectively. All in all, I think Beijing's in a real bind when it comes to how to respond to Lai. They can't outright criticize the ROC without alienating a chunk of their own supporters, but at the same time, they can't ignore how Lai is reshaping the narrative on Taiwan's status. It's a tricky situation, and I'm curious to see how China reacts in the coming months. They've been avoiding directly addressing Lai's points so far, and instead, they've just labeled him as pro-independence in a sort of knee-jerk reaction. But that strategy can only go so far. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be an interesting ride. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more updates. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.